welcome back to Simply Haven Farms. Today we're going to take our big chicken tractor, which was 16 feet by 8 feet, and make it into two smaller chicken tractors, which are going to be 8 feet by 10 feet. We're going to go ahead, I've already cut it in half. We actually already did the other one, but we're going to go ahead and show you how we did the other one on this one. So let's get started. First thing we're going to do is we're going to put these two the two sides on here, and we're just putting two 2x4 by 10s on. I've already cut these to 10 feet. And then after that we'll start putting the top of the framing on. So you want to make sure when you're putting any piece of lumber running like parallel to the ground, you want to make sure and crown it. And what that is you want to look down from end to end and see which way, because no piece of lumber is perfectly straight. You want to make sure the bend or the hump looks more like a rainbow than a smiley face. So the hump goes up. That way it's working with gravity. Gravity's going to always want to push that board down, but that hump's going to kind of resist it a little bit better than if it was the other way. You want to hold that side? Mm-hmm. Okay. And for this, we're using 3-inch deck screws, which are coated for exterior use. We want to make sure not to have to replace this every year or even every 5 years. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to put a 2-foot 4x4 in the corner to give it, to support and hold this top portion up. The reason it was 2 feet is, one, because the big chicken coop was 2 feet, and two, that gives the wall, or gives some height to the walls before it starts going and closing off the roof, so that we can walk in it a little easier. So the next step is I'm going to take this off, put it in the corner to give this corner support. We'll eventually take the back one there off and put it in the middle, and that will give kind of support everywhere. The door is going to be right here, which will give support at these points as we go. But I kind of, on this, I didn't really follow plans. I kind of just started and went and did things and figured it out as we went on the first one. Second one, I know basically what we're doing, so I don't have to think as much on this one, but don't be scared to try things. We tried that big chicken coop, and it would have been great on a big, huge pasture where we pull it straight for a week or something and then maybe turn it around. But here we have a very small pasture, so we get like 2 or 3 days out of it, and then I have to turn it around, and it was a little bit of a hassle to turn it around. So that's why we're going this route rather than the big coop. So one tip I have is both of these screw heads were sucked in below the surface. So if I were to take this first screw out all the way, a lot of times this second screw this board will just push back. So if you just take it so the head is just barely sticking out, it's still got a good amount of threads in this board, so it's still holding this board in place. Then you can take the second one out, and now both the heads are out, so both these screws will come out with no issue, so you're not fighting it. So you want to make sure you use some corner supports, more than just either 2x4 or 4x4 here. That's going to give it shear strength, which is rotational or lateral strength. As you move these across the pasture, if that wheel were to catch as you're pulling, this side will still pull, and eventually it will wiggle all those screws loose. And what these do is it helps prevent that. Is it going to be perfect? Not exactly, but having this is going to be a whole heck of a lot better than not having it. And it'll make your tractor last a lot longer. Right, now that we've gotten to kind of a good stopping point to explain how we got to this point, if you didn't have a coop like we did that we just cut in half, what you'd want to do is take, I guess if you're building the exact coop we have 4 boards cut at 8 foot and 4 boards cut at 10 foot. We screwed the 8 foot boards into the 10 foot boards, and then we'd build this side, screw the 8 foot boards together to this vertical 2x4. I cut it 2 feet, and then we did the same thing over there. And then we put this wall and screwed it into these boards, and then put that 4x4 or 2x4 over there, or in this case it's actually a 4x4. Then we just kept working around, and we did that. If you will go ahead and watch the one of us building the 10x16 Chickentractor, we do go through kind of that step on that video, and you can go ahead and watch that and go through a little bit that a little bit more in detail. Now we're going to go ahead and start cutting the boards for the A-frame on the top. And how I got the measurement is I took Pythagorean theorem, I believe is what it's called, which is, if you have any 3 measurements on a triangle, you can find the other ones. So we're trying to find the hypotenuse, because I know the 2 sides of a triangle, or I know the measurements of these 2 sides of what I want it to be. And I was trying to calculate the hypotenuse, and it's about 4 feet and 4 feet, so you get about 67, and it's about 5/8. And then you have to subtract just a little bit because the board in the middle, that's going to run length. So we cut them at 67.5 for ours, based on our measurements. So I'm going to go ahead and cut those, and that allows me to use 45-degree angles. So everything's pretty simple in that regard. So y'all will kind of notice I'm all about efficiency. I always am trying to make what we're doing faster. So I like to lay all my, because these are all the same cuts, I'm going to lay all of them out, and then I'm going to mark each one individually at the 45-degree angle. Then once I cut these, I'm going to flip them real quick, measure them all, and then I'll cut all of them rather than one at a time. It ends up saving time. It may not seem like a big deal, but when you do 5 or 10 projects, it starts adding up quickly. So that's one tip, I guess, I can give you to save you a little bit of time. The brand I like to use is Milwaukee. I use that brand for a few reasons. One, their toolbox pack out system makes my job really easy. Like when I'm going into a house, I can have, if it's plumbing, I can bring my plumbing toolbox in, and it's got wheels and it's got drawers, and I can access everything really easily. I tried the rigid one. That's kind of a pain because you have to unstack everything to access anything. The DeWalt doesn't snap together real well. I just found the Milwaukee pack out system really good. And then their tools are they have power. If you're just doing the occasional project here and there, you may not want to invest the extra money, but for me, so I use this saw 4, 5, 6 times a week at work. And that's for like projects. That's not just getting it out and cutting once. And then I use a screw gun pretty much all day, every day, doing different things. So having reliable tools that are powerful and the batteries last, it seems like forever, it's important for my job. And then it works great around the farm too. So. So I've already cut the two 2x4s that are going to run between these boards in the middle, but I just got to cut the one that's going to run at the peak. It's going to be 10'3", and how I got that is I know this board is 10 feet. Each of these outside boards is 1.5 inches. So you got 1.5 inches plus 1.5 inches, it's 3 inches, plus the 10 feet, that's 10 foot 3 inches. And that's where I'm cutting this one. Now that we have the frame for the A-frame set up, I went ahead and measured down to the middle, which is going to be 33 3/4. I subtracted 3/4, which is half of the thickness of the 2x4, to get the edge. And that way we can line up the edge. We're not trying to eyeball the middle. And then we'll go ahead and screw these on. And then we'll go ahead and we'll put all of the metal up, or the hardware cloth. And after we get the hardware cloth going on, we will go ahead and put the roof on, and then we'll have to put the wheels on, and then the plumbing inside, and the door, and it'll all be done. So we'll just kind of keep plugging away. So I didn't want this to be too heavy, so I made this 6 feet tall. So the door is actually going to open, or going to sit here and there. I just cut these at 6 feet tall, and then I'll have a cross member. So when the door opens, you will have these that, I mean, your door's going to kind of lap that area, so it's not a big deal there. But then you have, I can walk under this with, once this is all off the ground with the wheels and everything, I can walk under this without hitting my head. Now if I step over here, like when I'm filling the feeders, I have to bend down anyways to fill the feeders, so it's not a big deal to not be 6 feet in there. But if you're taller, you may want to make it a little higher. You would have to change the angles on this, or just build your sidewalls a little taller. Probably the sidewalls would be a little easier to do. But just wanted to mention that this is a 6 foot design the way we have it. So this is our hardware cloth. We got a 4 foot roll and a 5 foot roll. At the time I bought this, it was only like $90 for this giant roll that we use on everything. I think it was Stromberg's, if I remember correctly, but I'll double check and put the link in the description. This is so much more economical. It's a little bit more of a pain because you have to cut it down to 2 foot section or whatever, but it's well worth the hundreds of dollars we've saved on buying this roll versus the 2 foot rolls that are 25 feet long. What we're doing is we're going to cut a 10 foot section, and then we'll cut it in half, and that will complete all the rest of the hardware cloth we need. That's 2 foot. And then we have a section that we pulled off of our last Chickentractor, the giant one, that we're going to use, and we'll cut it up to finish the rest of it. here is an example of the 3-inch deck screw we use to get all the framing together. And then for the hardware cloth we use, it's 1.25 inches. It's got a big head. It's for attaching, standing seam metal roofing to wood. They work really well. They've got a big enough head so it can catch onto enough of the hardware cloth, but then they have relatively aggressive teeth on it so that it does grip the wood as well. And then it does have a galvanized coating, so it is made for the outside and getting wet. It's not quite as good as the coating on the deck screws, but it works. So we have all the hardware cloth on now, all the way around, with the exception to the door, which we'll put on after we build the door. And then now we're gonna put the frame, we're gonna frame out the door, and then build the door and put the door up. And then we'll put the wheels on, and that should be it for framing. That's what I'm doing here. Is I made a mark 3 feet in from each side, and that's giving me my opening for my door, which is a 2-foot door. Then we do the same thing on this side. Gonna start at the bottom, line the bottom up flush. Get these lined up flush with the bottom and even with the lines. I'm just going to double check this is 2 foot because sometimes these get warped slightly. It's just a smidge over 2 foot, so I'm going to pull this in just a smidge, keep the gap small. I'm going to come up at the top, screw it down, line it up, and do the same thing on the other side. Now that this is all together, I can cut this middle part out and make the opening. I have the doorway in. I'm going to go ahead and build the door. I'm actually going to build the door just a hair smaller than 2 feet. That way it has room to open and close. And then one thing I did on the other one that I'm not going to do on this one is I built the door all the way down to the bottom of the 2x4. I'm going to build it up just a little bit. That way the door will swing open and closed even if when this is sitting basically on the ground. I'm going to double check my measurements. So for this, I'm going to be using a Craig jig. This is going to allow me to screw in or at an angle. So they make a clamp. If I do this a lot, I use a clamp, but for this, I'm just going to use my hand. But it's got a drill, and you just take it. Hold on, back with it. Okay, there we go. And then move this up. Do it again. So you want to make sure and give it some, again, shear strength on the door so it doesn't start sagging over time. And how we're doing that is we're actually just putting two 245s on a little board, and they're going to go on the hinge side corner, and that'll help square the door up and keep it all square and good for probably years to come. Should be years to come. Now that we're done with the framing, we have the door in. We didn't put the latch on or the handle on yet, but we'll put that on after the roof. We're gonna go ahead and start the roof, and what we're using is corrugated, I think it's plastic or vinyl or something. And we got this from our neighbor. He's actually done a project around his house, over his carport. He was taking that off and using galvanized. When he had to fix a bunch of boards that were rotten, and when he's using the galvanized, he was going to get rid of this and asked if we wanted it. So we said we could probably find something to use it on, and so we're going to use it on the chicken coops. What we're doing is, rather than cutting it and having a seam at the top and having a ridge vent piece or a ridge piece, we are actually just going to fold this over. The plastic bends enough where that will work. We do have some screw holes that we're going to silicone. But other than that, I mean, they work. We put it on the other coop. It bends okay. It's a little bit of a pain to get the first one bent, but after the first one, they've been pretty good. Easier to do all of one side and then go on the other side and then bend it one at a time, go in that direction as well. It just, again, seemed to go a little faster and smoother. Didn't have to fight it as much and go back and forth. So I'm using these roofing screws. I use a 5/16 bit. I have a washer with a gasket on it, and so that'll prevent any rain from going through and rusting out the screws or the wood, rotting out the wood. Anyway. So what I'm doing is, whatever wheels you buy, so we bought 8-inch wheels. I have some bigger ones, but it didn't work for chickens in this. If we're doing like a laying coop, that's what those were. They're, I think, 10-inch wheels, and it just makes the back a little too high for small chickens. Meat chickens, they're babies when they're real young. So I'm gonna go about 3.5 inches from the edge. Oh, sorry. What I did was I just took a long piece here and then a short piece here. And because we're retrofitting a coop to have these wheels,
this has to be a separate piece. Normally we could run that 10-foot one long, but what I did is I cut an 8.5-inch piece, and we'll butt this up against the back of the coop, and then the wheel will be bolted to this. So we're gonna go 3.5 inches up, and then we're gonna go 1 3/4 in, and with that's half, so it's gonna be the strongest this can be. We're gonna go the same thing here, 3.5, 1 3/4. Then I'm gonna take the same drill bit we used earlier for the door. And I'm gonna go straight through this. And we have these bolts. We go through the wheel. This extension so it sticks out from the wood slightly, and then this will go on, but we need to find when we get set up the socket. And put this on. Make sure the other side. Okay, now we'll go through this. You don't want a ton of wiggle, but you also don't want your bearing to be too tight. So, okay, I'm going to do the same thing on this one. So those spin freely. Now, it'd probably be just as good if you attach them like this versus having them on the coop. You just use less wood, having it just pre-attached. Again, we're retrofitting this a little bit, so we don't really have the luxury of building it like this. Another reason I like doing it like this is because it makes it so much easier to do the panel or the hardware cloth. Then you just put this on over the hardware cloth and it works real great. So we're going to go ahead and lift the back side of the coop up a few inches and put some temporary support under it just so we can get this on, and we'll take it out and wrap up the front. Then we'll be good to go inside to do the plumbing. So we're doing chicken waterers inside, and that's what I mean by plumbing. I butt the back up against here, and then just run this along the 2x4 flush with the bottom. I'm gonna come up here and screw this in, get this flush with the bottom again. And then I'll go inside, and I'll actually put 3 coming from inside to the outside as well. And what that does is just ensures that both sides are connected to each other rather than just from one. We go over here and do the same thing over here. For this chicken coop, we are going to be using, I guess, these chicken waterer cups. They're spring loaded so that when they fill, the weight of the water will cause the gasket that's inside here, to stop the water, and therefore not allow any more water to go into. I don't know if y'all can recall, if you watched a previous video that we had, we put this in our big chicken coop, or Chickentractor rather, and it didn't work because we had hooked it up to a hose and the pressure was just too much for this. So what we're doing is we're using 5-gallon buckets. I'm going to drill a hole in the bottom, and we're going to use these these things to go through it. So this goes on the bottom and it tightens up like so, and this gasket's on the top, and it will seal up water from leaking through your 5-gallon bucket, but also allow water to come through. And then you just use your 1/2-inch threaded pipe to screw in there, and then that's how you transition into your normal PVC to run down through these cups. So we're gonna go ahead and get started, and I'll try to stop the hyperlapse from time to time, and as we explain steps or anything that's new or I feel like needs to be shared more specifically. So any threaded fitting, you want to make sure to either use thread tape, thread sealant, which is more of a liquid, like a thick liquid, and then, or you can actually, since it's PVC, you can use primer. So that'll heat up the PVC and kind of melt it just a little bit, and that will help the threads fit together and create a watertight seal. You got to use one of those 3 ways to seal it up so that you don't leak any water. And you don't need to over tighten these. Just go to hand tighten and then a 1/4 turn more. So again, we're using these same screws as on the roof. It's going to have the little gasket on it, just to hold the bucket in place. And we go ahead and screw it in place. And then we use this one. All right, now we can go ahead and start doing the PVC. I'm using a Fusion 1-step product, which is a primer and glue in one. That way I'm only doing 1 step, as the name suggests. Save time. Let's get started. So these are 1/2-inch by 1/8 inch threaded tees. So what this allows is for this 1/8 inch thread, go ahead and screw on when it wants to, and then once this gasket's tight, it'll seal up. But what I do is I cut a 5-inch piece of PVC to go on in there. You want to glue these all together, and you want to make sure they're all in a straight line. Like, it's really important that when you look down the pipe, these are flat to each other. Because if you start getting cockeyed, one's going to seal up the gasket, but this one would never seal up. Or this one will seal up and never let any water into it, so it's pointless to be there. So you want to get it super straight. So I go ahead and put on, I'll build this section and then I'll put it in place. Then I'll build this section and put it in place, so on and so forth, so that I can watch each section and make sure they're all the same. All right, so on the other chicken coop, we went ahead and did a bunch of waters. I think we have like 30 or something ridiculous. And the reason we have so many on that one, maybe it's just 25. Anyways, the reason we have so many on that one is because we're gonna use that coop as a brooder, as well as a chicken coop as they age. Mommy. And this one, we're not going to ever use as a brooder, so we're only doing 16 because we're gonna have 50 birds. That should be enough waters as long as we keep the buckets full. We will go ahead. I can add more if we need to. You're not gonna fall, baby. But hopefully we don't need to add more.
Can you turn the water off real quick? All right. So we're gonna go ahead and hang the feeders. So I'm gonna go ahead and put some eye hooks up in this this board. So I just go with a screw first to give it a kind of pilot hole, which makes it a lot easier to spin it and get this to start. And then to take my screwdriver and spin it from there. So I'm just measuring that we have 36-inch feeders, so I'm gonna go 36 and 72. And that'll be my other two eye hooks. So we'll go ahead and do the same thing as I did over there. We opted to hang our feeders so that we can move the chicken tractor in the morning and not have to move the feeders out. Because
Mommy.
What, buddy?
That's right,
yeah,
donkey.
That's right, it's a donkey. I mean, our waterers don't need moved. We might as well have our feeders not move, and then we just move it, and then I'll come in after I move it and pour the actual feed in. And then we'll fill the water from outside. Opted to use rope for our chicken coop, or to hang our chicken feeders in this tractor. And what I'm doing is there's 3 holes which you can adjust the height of the rotating portion, and we're using the 2 that we are not using to rotate the arm. So it works out pretty nicely. It just ties on. And I just double knot it. Very simple knot. That way I can still kind of untie it if I need to. And then we hook this to a carabiner. Then I'll start back on the bottom and do it again.
Wire.